Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this engine is for a wicked little mini bike. Today, we're going to be assembling a high-performance Hisun 99cc engine. I already removed the governor and installed a billet flywheel. I have a couple of videos on the Predator 79cc governor removal. It was the exact same process. The only difference was the addition of this 1/4-inch barb. The biggest differences between the Hisun 99cc and the Predator 79 are the stroke, the piston and rod, as well as the cam. This is actually the cam out of the Hisun. They're pretty much the same. Only difference is the Predator one is all metal. It doesn't have that plastic gear. The differences in the piston itself go a little bit further than the bore. The Predator is a 52 millimeter and the Hisun is a 56. The Predator piston comes up almost to the top of the deck. The Hisun sits in a little bit more. They both have the same compression ratio of 8 to 5 to 1. More surface area. You have to reduce it if you're going to use basically the same head. Here's what they did. On the Predator, they use a smaller wrist pin. It increases the compression height. They bring the piston up higher. In the Hisun 99, they use a bigger wrist pin and a lower compression height. The stroke is different. The Predator has a 37 millimeter stroke. The Hisun has a 40. So if you tried using the Hisun crank in the Predator, you would pop the piston right up out of the hole. If you used the Predator crank inside of the Hisun to switch it from 16 millimeter to 5/8, where you can get a 3/4 adapter and have a few more options, you would be losing stroke. So this piston, even though it would fit on the journal, the combination of rod and piston would not come up even this far. So you would end up going downhill. You don't want to do that. While we're looking at differences, we might as well compare the two blocks up here on the workbench. Where they used sheet metal on the Predator, they took the extra time to add to the actual molding, and I think it actually works as a little bit of reinforcement. They both have the same spline along the cylinder, the governor towers, even the gas tank mounts. The Hisun has 2 oil drains and the Predator only has the one. On the bottom of the Predator, they use a full plate. On the 99, it's like 2/3 plates. My favorite difference between the two is the galley hole. If you can see down in there, there's a big one right in the center. Over on the Predator, it's just that little pinner. Other than that, that's about it. Even the side covers are about the same. Bearings and everything. And then there is the heads. The Hisun's has already been modified. The Predator's is completely stock. The castings are almost identical. The real differences are on the inside. This is the intake valve out of the Hisun. This is the intake valve out of the Predator. Notice the shrouding down here. The Hisun's, when you put the calipers to it, is ever so slightly bigger than the Predators. Even though the exhaust valves are identical in size, again, we have the shrouding on the Predator and a little extra meat on the Hisun. The push rods on the Hisun are slightly shorter. To make up for that, they run a longer lifter. It's actually the same length as a clone 196 GX200 lifter, which that's what this is. The only difference is they have a smaller face on the tappet. Because they used a longer push rod on the Predator, they use the shorter lifter. As far as the rockers, well, there's a couple little things there too. If we line up where the push rods hit in the back, you can see that the Hisun has a longer rocker. If we look at them from the side, we can see that there's also a different profile. I wonder what these would do in the 79. Even though the heads are almost identical, I mentioned that the Hisun's has been modified. If we flip it over, you can see the extra meat on the gasket surface. We took 60 thousandths off the same face on the Hisun head. In doing so, we seem to have found the threads for the lower exhaust stud. I asked a few pros, and we've come to a conclusion. This is outside of the compression zone and also outside of the fire ring. I have the gasket outside with some copper spray on it. I'm going to flip it over, spray the other side, and we'll be installing this as is. If there's any issues, we already have a plan of attack. I trust these professionals so much that I went ahead and ported this thing out. Over on the intake side, you can really see the difference. Oh yeah, we opened her right up. Took back the short radius, cleaned up the transitions into the bowl, and then did a port match for the custom intake that we'll take a look at in a few minutes. Over on the exhaust side, again, went after that short radius, our bowl transitions, and then open the port up. It's kind of like a funnel action. You can see we're a little bit bigger than stock. So 60 thousandths off to build compression and some custom porting to help the flow. All of this head work, the governor removed, the billet flywheel installed. All of this is so that we can run one of these. This is a PZ19 slide carburetor. This will give you a better perspective of things. 19mm carb, 15mm carb. Big bowl, little bowl. This one is going to feed a lot more fuel and air than this little guy here. One of the most important parts is having that flywheel on there. And everything else we do. Because it's going to help support the tuning of this thing. I'm about to install the head, and I just made one more observation. If we look at the top of the deck, top of the cylinder area, we have a little bit of cyborg meat. If we look at the Hisun 99, we have a little bit more. This is another area where they may have adjusted the compression ratio with the casting. I might run that by my machine guy and maybe see if we could take something off that surface the next time around. This head gasket was a piece of work. The original coating from the factory had started peeling in a few places, and I had the genius idea to just spray copper gasket maker over it. Well, it actually helped the original layer to release in some places, and it bubbled up, and it was just a big mess. But I took my antics over to a few of the Facebook groups, and I get a few friends and some professionals over there that don't mind helping out. And I think we came up with a solution. I ended up cleaning this thing right down to the bare metal, and then I hit it with 3 layers of the copper. So we should be good to go this time. I let it set up overnight just in case, but it's still pretty tacky. Now I just have to get it all the way over there without getting my paws all over it. Yeah, buddy. Black flies and all. Everybody goes to the barbecue today. If I gave credit where credit is due, I could go on for an entire video. I'm talking mini bike builders, fabricators, engine builders, go-kart racers, mini bike racers, dirt track, drag race, you name it, they're all in the mix. And I'm not afraid to admit when I'm over my head and and I have a problem. So, you know, I try to give credit where it's due. I'll put some links and stuff in the description, but you know, there's some really great guys out there that are willing to help, and you know, I just want them to know that they are appreciated. So, with that said, it was basically a 50-50 toll on what to do with this blemish. We are outside of the fire ring, as I mentioned, and we have 2 options. We either fill it and finish it. Well, we actually have 3. We could fill it and finish it from the surface. We could fill it from the inside, let it come out, wipe it clean, do something like that. This is CNC'd. Alright, it doesn't get much better than this. So, our other option is to send it, and I think that's what we're going to do. Well, I know that's what we're going to do because I'm about to do it. So, if we have an issue with this, and this does fail, we have an idea as to how to fix it, and we don't think it's going to get any worse than it is. It's outside of the compression zone, so we know it's there. We'll just keep an eye on it. I'll also keep that in mind when setting my lower exhaust stud. We have plenty back in here. It is simply the depth of the threading itself into the casting. So, here's what it is. I already have these valves lapped. They're ready to go. I'm just going to get this put back together, and the only difference other than stock is I will be utilizing 22-pound springs. You want that sweet RPM, guys. If you don't like building small engines because it's messy, because you don't have a quality oil can and a surface that you were going to throw out anyway, you just find something, you know, get a long shot maybe. Oh, there we go. Who cares? Have fun with it. You gotta love what you do. I think my valve springs are currently stuck at the post office. this little guy over here might have what we need. Got him. 22s aren't the easiest thing to pull out of these heads. As you can see, you don't have a whole lot to work with at the stem. The stock springs are a little bit shorter. You can run any clone spring, but since we are on the slip style retainers, 22s is a good maximum number. It's also as far as I'd want to push the stock rod. Just a couple drops of the red Kool-Aid on the last few threads. We're going to be torquing these at 22 foot-pounds. No looking back now. It's on there. Even though this is a performance build, I'm setting my valve lash at 3 thousandths. Hug and kiss. Snug on the exhaust and just catching it with the intake. Most of my built engines, I run them tight, probably 1.15, something like that. The 79s and 99s like the loose lash to help them build RPM. That gets them into that usable torque range a little quicker. Doesn't even sound like the valves are slapping the piston. That's a good sign. When you're looking for your clearance, we're looking for something like that. Alright, so when we're setting the head gasket and we consider the depth that our piston was in the hole plus what we left on the face, we only went 60 thousandths instead of the 70 thousandths. We should be okay. As far as the spark plug, if I use this new one, I might, well, I'll definitely put a copper washer under it. I'd like to index it, but also bring it up a little bit. I'll see how it falls. Meaning I'll grab a copper washer, stick it on there, and give it a spin around. See where it lays. I might actually have a couple new spark plugs in the mail. So we're going to hold off on that and we're going to jump straight to the carburetor. If you want to attach a PZ19 slide carburetor to your Hisun 99 or Predator 79, you're going to need an intake manifold. And that is exactly where DIRTFOOT Racing steps in. Last time I attached a PZ19 to a Predator 79, I had ordered a longer intake, but it didn't really fit the application that I had. So I cut the intake down and welded the two ends together. This is what I came up with. And it actually worked rather well. I was looking for something a little bit nicer though. Walt from DIRTFOOT Racing, well, he fabricated this little gem right here for me. It has the nice direct, compact design, except he was able to retain some of the curved section. That's super beneficial to this build. We're trying to keep everything small, compact, and somewhat inside the frame. This manifold will help us do just that with our carburetor installation. On the end with the large flange, there is a smaller hole. This hole is slightly bigger than the one on the carburetor. On the other end, you have a bigger hole. That matches this hole here, right on the intake port. If you look through it, you can see that there aren't any ridges on this side. That's the direction of the flow. Now that we know what direction that this is going in, we need to attach it. I'm just using a couple flanged bolts and the gasket that I punched out. I just traced the manifold, figured out where my holes were, and cut it off a bigger piece. I made one for the other side too, just in case. Where everything is so rigid, I don't think we're going to need it though. Bolts, gasket, and then I put a little high heat RTV on my threads. Well, Walt, you couldn't really ask for a better fit or more factory look than that, buddy. I'm impressed. Where you use the regular bolts, you can get in right next to where the valve cover would go. On this side, you're in the wide open. And I'm pretty sure that even with the sheet metal installed, we'd still be able to access those. Right on, brother. These PZ19 carbs are actually like 19 bucks over on Amazon. Even came with a filter. I managed to track down the main jets, and I have some pilots on the way. For now, we're going to run the stock pilot and a number 80 on the main. One of the cooler things about these little PZ19s is the fact that you can make your adjustments from the side. So once your jets are safely tucked away and your carburetor's attached, you can still reach everything very easily. Another cool feature is the threaded flange. You could slide a nylock nut in there if you wanted to, but we're just using a bolt with a little lock washer. This looks great, and it's super solid. I'm going to leave the filter off for now, and we'll just place our cap on the end so nothing gets in. We're going to need a spark plug and a coil next. I just twisted the stock wire and resistor style boot off of the stock coil. I then added this nice upgraded wire and non-resistor boot that Grey Goat himself made for me. I also removed the intermittent kill switch wire. I already have one rigged up on the mini bike that is going to plug directly into the coil. I had to file down 2 copper washers. The stock plug works perfectly. I'm now going to pull the plug and I'm going to cut it and gap it. I just snipped off a tiny little piece from the end. See that there? Now I'm going to gap that with 2 business cards. Sweet. I'm also going to use these business cards to gap my coil. You may have noticed the spacers back here that I'm using to center the coil over the magnet. That has to do with the governor removal and the fitment of the flywheel. So we'll also be using spacers on the fan shroud. That way the starter cup lines up. Right now we have a better signal. We have an improved transfer, and our plug is cut for a bigger spark that is centered between the intake and exhaust inside the chamber. We also lifted the plug up to match what we took out of the head. That way we're not smacking piston. Whoa! It looks like I jumped ahead a few steps, but in reality all I did was reuse the valve cover that we just had on the 196 that was on the CT100U. I then plumbed the same line that I had running from my crankcase cover to the valve cover extension in between my new barb and the same barb over here. I just threw the air filter on so we can kind of see what it looks like. Pretty cool. This engine requires 11.83 ounces of oil. I have just under 12 in this quart, so I'm going to dump the majority of it into my engine. I'm going to need a funnel. Since this is a performance engine and we're going to be cranking a little more RPM, I held it back about an ounce, maybe a little less. We're going to need a header at some point, so we might as well install this one piece exhaust real quick. I have one stock gasket and one clone gasket. This one's a little snug getting it on. I'll need 2 hands, but The idea is that the exhaust port is slightly smaller than the entrance to the header itself. You can see how the D lines up. I'm just going to take a stock gasket, get that on there, and I might be able to, yeah, even with that on there, it's not going to interrupt the flow to this. It's just going to give me a little more sidewall action up here where the 99 is a little shallow. Believe it or not, our list is getting a whole lot shorter. At least up until this point. Then things get interesting. But that's what happens when it's a work in progress. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. I want you to stay. I want you to stay. I want you to stay. I want you to stay.